Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast. We'll be continuing our walkthrough of Franz Bardon's Initiation into Hermetics, finishing up with step 8 today. And so this is one of the first introductions in the book to what we might call spiritual technologies, right? And the use of physical substance for spiritual purposes. And this goes a little bit beyond ritual. Okay, now how does it go beyond ritual? Well, ritual can imbue anything with spiritual significance over time through the depth of the ritual repeated again and again and again. When we're looking at spiritual technology, there seems to be efficacy apart from the ritual, though the ritual of creating the technology itself can add an incredible amount of potency to it. So, without further ado, fluid condensers is where this particular section starts. Now, the fluid condensers are a means of a substance that you can load your intention, the frequency, the purpose of the practice into, and then that condenser, that fluid, can be applied to various substances. So fluid condensers exist, again, if we follow the elemental framework, at the physical, right, in terms of solid, right? It can work through fluids and it can work through gases. Okay, so that would be earth, water, air. And then that leaves the unknown of the fire. What's that substance that you can use as a fluid condenser? Okay, so if you're working through the physical, that, he only offers a few options here because there's so many. And if you expand on everything in this book, this turns into volumes and volumes and volumes and volumes. So to the solid condensers, gold is the main one discussed. And there's a lot that can be found within gold, especially when we start looking at monatomics, its conductive agency and capacity. There's some really good work on monatomic gold by Lawrence Gardner. You can explore that. Some really interesting potential through lines in old religious texts as well that relate to monatomic gold. Now, Bardon, we'll get to this shortly, doesn't seem to explore that side of it, but using gold in the fluid condensers is quite powerful. So you have the physicality of the gold. Also included in that is the resins. Then you have, that's the solid version. Then you have the liquid version, which would be anything from, liquid resins to lacquers, oils, etc., that are obviously quite liquid. And then you have the gaseous condensers, which would be things like aromatherapy type of things. So things that are worked through the evaporation standpoint or through the air element itself. And there's a lot to be said for fragrances, different types of incense that are burned in association with different religious practices, etc. And so you can have a lot of potential that exists in the fragrance world as well. So that is the first little portion of this, just introducing us to solid condensers, liquid condensers, and gaseous condensers. Sometimes this gets confusing because he uses the word fluid condenser to be all of them. Okay, metals as well are part of, gold is a metal, so the metallic world is part of the solid. The world of minerals and stones and gemstone magic, that's part of the solid condensers. And there's so much that can be involved with the solid condensers, a whole realms of study in like whatever you would call gemstoneology, metallurgy, both from the crafting standpoint as well as the mixing standpoint, and the analogous relationships in all of these spectrums. Okay, so that brings us through that section. We're going to look at gold now in a little bit more detail. Okay, gold is referred to here as something that's added to every single condenser you will make. So why bother making a condenser? Well, apart from the actual technicalities of the condenser itself, from a spiritual standpoint, you have the time that you put into creating something. When you are creating something, you're pouring that time in, that thought, reverential, emotional potential, stillness, silence, and the physical action of making a technology. You are sharing or giving of yourself to that thing. And if you are at a point where you can be familiar enough with all of the spiritual energies, the elements, light, etc., Akasha, that you can be tapped to that and running those energies through while working a manual skill, while creating some type of art, or in this case, a spiritual condenser, then you will imbue that technology with the energy that you're running innately. And this is apart from even actively loading it, right? So there's a lot to be said here. Now, if you're not running a specific intention or relationship to energies, what you are will be imbued into it. So just sort of by acclamation, if someone's done a lot of work with their hands, building cabinetry or whatever it is, by nature of working on it, they're pouring a part of themselves into the art. So if we can cultivate and evolve this thing that is us, and then choicefully be a conduit through ourselves into the piece of art or the condenser or whatever it is, then that energy moves more purely. And instead of it being a representation of, you know, all of us, including the negative parts of ourselves, we can have some agency in terms of applying as positive a potential to the technology as possible. Okay, so now looking at gold, right? Why gold? Why is that such a big part? Gold, from a spiritual standpoint, is said to be the essentially the physical, analogous physically to light, to the light of the sun, right? So gold is to the sun, gold is to light. And as you work through these analogous relationships, that is where the potency of the condenser starts to come into play, as you're playing with laws of analogy, taking the physical representations and physical correspondences. You could look at the law of analogy as also the law of correspondence, as in the 7 Hermetic Principles book, which I'm gapping on the name of. It might just be the 7 Principles. So anyway, this law of correspondence, the light of the sun corresponds to the metal gold. So that is why gold is so important in this solar system. The sun is the soul of this solar system. It is the center. And from that center point of gold, we add a tremendous harmonizing agent and a relationship to the light of the sun. Now, if you load through your spheric magical work the frequency of the sun, that particular type of light, and by particular I don't mean one. There's so much vastness in the sun, when you load that into the gold as well, then you're increasing that relationship. If you do this with Akasha as well, you get some really good stuff happening. So there's a few different ways that Bardon discusses in terms of making gold substance, because you can buy like almost a colloidal type gold. There's different ways of taking gold. The simplest one, it seems, is on fire, heating up gold till it's red hot, and then taking distilled water and cooling the gold in that water. So the idea there is that very, very minute, a minute dilution of gold water starts to appear, because such a small amount will, as the heated gold goes in, essentially break off, I suppose, into the water. Now, we also want to look at this stuff beyond the chemical components and just the physical components. That is where a lot of this stuff sort of fails under that particular chemical pharmaceutical type of mindset. Is it's not the chemistry of it. That might add to a part of it, but it is certainly by no means the brunt of it. There, it is these laws of correspondence that are pouring through, and the frequency itself. And that is why a lot of, as far as I can tell, why a lot of substances that are made from this type of frequency loading standpoint don't stand up under chemical analysis, because it's not about the chemical, it's about the information that's been added to the substance itself. Okay, so something to consider. You can feel the vibration of a substance once you've trained enough, where you can touch. I remember I had a vial that was charged up with, what was it? It was like ATP, adenosine triphosphate, multiplied in amplitude by 1,000,000. And you touch it and it was just whoomp, an incredible amount of sort of good feeling vitality that would come through, which was really nice. So gold, super important to work with, and is a part of every fluid condenser in this entire section here, okay? The next thing you look at is the preparation of simple fluid condensers. Now, before we get to that, when you're working with alchemy, right, there is a really important thing of the intention, right? So running that intention and keeping ourselves as pure as possible, like we said earlier, for that light to flow through, okay? So that's really important, being as clear as possible internally. Now, there are like the usage of plants and all of these things. When we're putting that into a condenser, we want to make sure that we're not getting the residue, like the purely physical residue. So there's always a filtering process that's part of this. Okay, so a super simple condenser, you can go through all the specifics in terms of how to make them. That's not why I'm filming these. But he has simple fluid condensers, there's the compound fluid condensers, and then there's the element fluid condensers. Okay, so one of the biggest holding points for this aspect of the work is that if you're really inclined to spiritual practice in terms of meditation and energy work and cultivation and dissolution of yourself, etc., often this physical side can seem like a lot of work. So we need to come into resonance with it. And that is one of the points that holds a lot of people back, is that it can feel like a lot of work. So build up a bunch of vital energy and life force, build up a bunch of light, profine your Akasha, and then from light start exploring this work. This aspect of the physical side of the practice, through doing that work, you are putting yourself in a place where you're almost, I don't know if this is the right word, but like earning the through flow of the energy by showing the work that you're putting in. It's very easy to meditate and maybe be focusing for 10 seconds out of every hour, right? Where you're sort of in and actually moment by moment there and really locked in and freed into that frequency you're exploring. So this is another way of applying work, okay? So you have the basic fluid condenser. Start with that because it's simple. It doesn't take much time. It's not a big use of resistance. The barrier to entry from an anxiety standpoint isn't super high. The thing that you will hold most people back with this is the gold. And there's a few ways that Bardon mentions in terms of acquiring or dissolving some gold into these substances. You can also, these days, you can buy colloidal golds. You can buy like monoatomic golds that different companies will make. So you can do that. The one that appeals to me the most is the burning and the cooling. The reason for this is you're making it yourself. It's relatively simple. You don't need, you can use, like, as he mentions, electrolysis. It doesn't require an incredible amount of knowledge, right? And when you do something yourself, you are at every part of the process able to imbue the purity of light and of your potential intentions into each aspect of the process. So that's pretty useful. Now, you could take this as far as growing each of the plants and working with the soil and really taking this as far back as possible. But if you do that, you might never actually get to making the thing. So we just want to make it as easy as possible to start, and then you can start working on really creating each aspect of it if that's something that you want to get into. Now, from a certain standpoint, a lot of people will push this side of things away so that almost as a distraction. Go, okay, well, this type of stuff, working with the physical like this is a distraction from spiritual essence, from true emptiness, from spiritual union, because you're working with this stuff when you could be meditating. However, if your meditative practice is at a stage where it's permeating your being, and your relationship with these energies is at a stage where it's really permeating the entirety of your being, making all this stuff is an expression of your practice. And not only is it an expression of it, but all of this particular section is about enhancing and amplifying the practice. So if you have worked on each aspect of the fluid condenser, and then you've made the condenser, and then you start applying it, your connection to what you're doing, that has been paved right from the beginning. And the importance that you give the task that you're doing, the importance that you give to the process that you're working through, and to the intention that you're going to imbue that fluid with, and how that's going to permeate, that will mean more to you because you've put a lot of time in preparation into it, right? And so this aspect of preparation is really quite important because it can, by its nature, offer a type of sacredness to what we're doing. It's so easy with this stuff to sort of do it flippantly, right? To just very casually, oh, I'm just gonna blah, blah, blah. But if you really do some preparation, then it will increase the silence and the depth underneath whatever it is that you're planning to be working on. Okay, so simple fluid condenser, compound universal condenser. There's a lot of ingredients to this one, but that would be a fun one to go through. It's just a little bit more time to get all the ingredients together, right? And again, this is part of the practice. It's an aid to the practice. It's part of the practice. So you can apply that relationship of it being practiced to it. Okay, there's a little section on life elixirs. And the thing, once again, that we're looking at here is the law of correspondence, the law of analogy, and how that applies through different physical substrate, whether it be gaseous, liquid, dense physical, obviously, and how these all relate to all the metals. You have the luminary metals, etc., etc. Maybe don't, maybe think long and hard before imbibing mercury. That might be something you don't necessarily want to put inside your body. That said, there are, I think it's in the Taoist worlds, I've heard of like amulets and stuff that go through long preparation, and some of the materials are, I believe, were mercury. All kinds of different sects have different things that they do. But, if you're going to be, it's not that you just want to like melt down, as much gold as you can and consume it. This stuff is all done in very minor quantities. And the idea, again, is this law of correspondence. Now, if your skill sets and relationships to frequencies on a universal standpoint have been developed, then you can really start applying physical, astral, mental, physical, liquid, gaseous, right? You can start applying those planes of work to the substances. You can start applying and loading light and different, let's say like the luminary bodies into the materials that you're using. Again, maybe look at some of the materials and have a good hard think before putting them into something you're going to consume. But it is these laws of analogies that are the key here. And that is a very big lesson when it comes to sort of fractaling in and out of like universal expansiveness. And as stuff solidifies, this into and out of form becomes very apparent. And the exploration of density and sort of dimensional identity starts to work with this flux. So there's a lot that can be learned there. Okay, there's a long section here on making magic mirrors. You can read through that. There's a really, the simplest version is literally taking, say, the universal fluid condenser and rubbing that onto a normal mirror, and that would be the simplest place to start. Once again, barrier to entry is low once you've made the fluid condensers. Okay, so let's see. The other things to look at here, we looked at gold for the physical. Bardon doesn't explore the gaseous too much. For the liquids, right, the fluids, and the astral, the closest physical substance to gold in the fluid plane in terms of its like life potency, we could say, would be blood. If you're a man, blood and semen. If you're a woman, blood, and I imagine menstrual blood would go in there. You'd have to check with female practitioners who have done a lot of work to see what they've explored and what's come out of their exploration. For using like bodily substance, for men, blood and semen are very strong. I imagine for women, blood would be equally as strong. Probably menstrual blood might be a crossover to the semen aspect in men. And then of course you have like hair, nails, physical substance. But with all of these, when you're working with the fluids, you are filtering at the end of the process. So something to be aware of. If you're going to use yourself as a massive connection and charging point into what you're working with, you might only want to use it for yourself though. You definitely don't want to be very wary if you're going to take your own substance and apply it to working with somebody else. I mean, outside of obvious potential like health type things that could be there, you have these odd etheric connections that can be built. So there could be some potential there for, like, if you're getting married and you want to do a ceremony that really links you and your partner, there could be some interesting stuff done there. But you know, another time, another place. We'll see. I haven't explored that one with people by any means, outside of using my own self and working on myself, which has a lot of potency. So this entire section here, spiritual technologies, using physical stuff to start exploring how this spiritual work can be brought into physical expression, and how you can work with physicality from a spiritual standpoint, and how physicality can aid spiritual work. Often from certain perspectives, we like to vilify anything that's physical when we're doing spiritual work, and we go, it's all Maya, it's all illusion. However, there's so much depth that we can bring to the practice through the inclusion of these physical things. Spiritual technologies also exist in numerology, sacred geometry, mandala, you know, physicality, like even like shape of the body, mudra, etc. These are other types of expressions. Now, because it's of the body, we like to think of these as more spiritual than the other stuff, but everything's everything, right? Everything's everything. So we need to be able to work with everything. So if you're a builder, you're a carpenter, you're a jeweler, like, you know, I have students who like cut hair, whatever it is that you're doing, you can start to work this spiritual stuff into those activities and allow for more and more and more of daily life, recognize the spiritual within it. Okay, so that's sort of one of the underlying lessons in this particular section. There's other technologies out there. You look at some of the old masonry, how ancient cathedrals were built. There's some really profound stuff there. If you've ever been in some ancient, like when I was in high school, I went to Russia on a band trip, and we went into a number of cathedrals. We even played a concert in one, and man, those were built for like Gregorian chanting and resonance. Just phenomenal. So, you know, there's a lot in and of the physical that can aid in the spiritual. Now, on the other side of that, you have a lot of people who obsess over spiritual technology and have developed not so much on the other side of the coin there, don't have very much access to stillness, and sort of rely on the technologies. Is there a lot of value in working with different technologies, whether it be, you know, sacred geometry or tensor bands and whatever? Absolutely a lot of value in it. However, if we are relying on the technology, then we want to use the technology and then learn how to tap that technology in the absence of its physical presence. So all of this physical stuff we can look at as stepping stones or as amplifiers for particular ritualistic purposes. But as the skill of the practitioner keeps evolving and keeps growing, then all of the ritual, all of the substance, the stone magic, the oops, that was the microphone, I have stone under it. All of the stone magic you might be working with, whatever it is you might be exploring, all of that stuff, you are building a relationship through the physical into your spiritual understanding, and then you can, through the spiritual, tap back into those physicalities. If you work with gold a lot, eventually you can tap back into the harmonizing function of the gold and all the other substances that you might be playing with. But it's a hell of a lot easier to find the correspondence if you have the physical thing there than it is to find it purely in the spiritual. And if you are going to use purely the spiritual, then that's where transmission becomes very, very valuable, because then you're not just searching in the dark, right? It takes you right where you need to go, and you can find that resonance. So lots to explore here. This is just the beginning of this type of work. So you can take this and do a lot on your own. Okay, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're interested in training with me, I have a workshop, Spiritual Attunement Retreat, levels 1 and 2, coming up here in June 2025 in British Columbia. And this is a 16-day program, and there's a lot of fun stuff we're going to be going through. You can check details on the website. Also, there are pre-recorded courses available online in Tai Chi, as well as Qi Gong, meditation, and some Hermetic alchemy. And part of the website as well is a Q&A video reference library we call the Zendent. And I answer any questions you might have on the material and the program there, or the programs there, via video, and I upload that to that library as soon as I can. So that's a really good resource for students as well. And if you're interested in private training, I offer online private coaching sessions as well. Okie dokie. Thanks for your time. Have fun. Bye.